The desert was never meant for nights like this. Wind howled across the plains, dragging sand and cold into every crack and hollow. The moon struggled to break through the storm clouds, casting fleeting silver over the endless miles of dust and thorn brush. Somewhere between the canyon ridge and the old riverbed, a lone woman stumbled forward, her shawl torn, her boots caked in mud, and a small bundle clutched to her chest. Clara had been walking since dusk, guided by the faint glow of lanterns she'd seen far off in the valley, lights belonging to the McGraw Ranch. Each step sent pain up her legs, but the sound of her baby's labored breathing kept her moving. The child was burning with fever, tiny whimpers escaping between shallow breaths. "Hold on, sweetheart," she whispered, pressing her lips to the baby's forehead. "Mama's here. We're almost there." Her own breath came out ragged. She hadn't eaten since morning, and the icy wind gnawed at her strength. Her husband had been gone for months now, taken by pneumonia during the last winter storm. Since then, the world had turned cruel and narrow. The landlady had thrown her out when she couldn't pay rent, and the neighbors, who once smiled, had begun crossing the street when she passed. A widow with a sick baby was a burden no one wanted to carry, but someone had told her about the McGraw Ranch, a place where a man named Eli McGraw lived alone, known for his horses, his stubborn silence, and the kindness he sometimes showed when no one was looking. Maybe, Clara thought, he'd at least give them shelter for the night. Maybe he'd let her baby see the sunrise. The wind picked up again, fierce and cutting, flinging sand into her eyes. Her knees buckled. She almost fell but caught herself, clutching the baby closer. "Please," she prayed through trembling lips. "Please, God, don't take him from me." Ahead, through the veil of dust and darkness, she saw the wooden gate of the ranch, a tall structure framed by two posts and the faint outline of the big house beyond. Her heart surged with fragile hope. She dragged herself forward one step at a time until her fingers found the cold iron latch. She banged it weakly with the side of her fist. "Help!" she cried, her voice breaking. "Please, someone help my baby." The sound vanished into the wind. She tried again, louder this time, desperation giving her strength. "Please, anyone!" A few moments passed before a light flickered near the barn. The door creaked open and a man stepped out holding a lantern. His shadow stretched long across the dirt. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a duster coat that flapped in the wind. Beneath his hat, his face was half hidden, but the light caught the sharp lines of a man used to hard work and long days. "What in heaven's name?" he muttered, lowering the lantern as he came closer. His boots crunched in the gravel. When he saw the woman swaying on her feet, clutching the bundle, his steps quickened. Clara's vision blurred. All she saw was the light moving toward her and the baby's face pale and still. "Please," she whispered one last time. "Please save my baby." Her knees gave out. She collapsed at the ranch gate, her arms still wrapped around her child. Eli McGraw caught her just before she hit the ground. The lantern light flickered over her face, mud-streaked, exhausted, and beautiful in a broken way. He looked down at the child in her arms, saw the faint rise and fall of its chest, and something deep inside him, something buried for years, shifted. The storm raged on around them, but for the first time in a long while, Eli felt a different kind of urgency, one that had nothing to do with cattle or fences. Without a word, he lifted both mother and child into his arms and carried them toward the warm light of the ranch house. The night swallowed their footprints, but the cry that started it all, soft, pleading, human, still echoed in the wind. Eli McGraw pushed open the heavy ranch door with his shoulder, carrying the woman and her baby inside. The wind slammed it shut behind him, rattling the windows and howling through the eaves. The warmth from the hearth wrapped around them, a sharp contrast to the cold that had nearly frozen her fingers stiff. "May!" he called out, his voice echoing through the house. "May, fetch some hot water, quick!" From the kitchen, an older woman appeared, her gray hair tied in a messy knot and her apron dusted with flour. She stopped short when she saw the sight before her, the soaked widow, pale and shivering in Eli's arms, clutching a child limp as a rag. "Mercy! Eli, what happened?" she gasped. "Found her outside the gate," Eli said, kneeling by the fire. He carefully pried the baby from the mother's arms. Said the baby's sick. May's face softened. Without hesitation, she hurried to the stove, pulling a kettle off the flame. Get a blanket around the little one. He's blue as winter sky. Eli did as told, though his rough hands trembled slightly. He wasn't used to this, to holding anything so small and fragile. His whole life had been built on solid things. Cattle, fences, horses, the kind of work that required muscle, not mercy. The woman began to stir. Her eyelids fluttered open, and for a moment she looked lost, like she'd forgotten where she was. Then she saw the baby in Eli's arms, and panic flared across her face. "My baby!" she cried, trying to sit up, but her strength failed her. Eli gently handed the child back to her. "He's right here, ma'am," he said quietly. "You're both safe." Clara clutched her son to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you." "Thank you, sir." Eli nodded stiffly and rose to his feet, turning toward the fire. Gratitude made him uneasy. He'd helped plenty of folks before, but always in small ways, fixing a broken wagon wheel, lending a horse. This was different. This was personal. May knelt beside Clara, pressing a hand to the baby's forehead. "He's got a fever, poor thing," she murmured. "We'll get him warm and fed. You just rest, dear." Clara tried to speak, but exhaustion overtook her. Within minutes, she was asleep on the rug, her baby nestled close, both of them bathed in the orange glow of the firelight. Eli stood there, arms crossed, staring down at them. Something in that picture tugged at a memory he didn't like to visit. The night he'd lost his own wife and the unborn child she carried. The doctor had said there was nothing to be done. He'd buried them both under the big oak near the river and never spoke of it again. May noticed his silence. "Don't go shutting your heart again, Eli," she said softly, straightening up. "That woman came here for a reason." Eli's jaw tightened. "I ain't shutting anything. Just doing what any decent man would." May smiled faintly. "Most men wouldn't open the gate on a night like this." He didn't answer. He just turned toward the window, watching the storm beat against the glass. The baby's weak cries filled the room, thin, uncertain, but alive. After a while, Eli went to the door and took his coat from the peg. "I'll check the stables," he muttered. "Need to make sure the horses are dry." But as he stepped outside, the truth gnawed at him. He wasn't thinking about the horses. He just needed air, needed to escape the ache that seeing that woman stirred inside him. Still, when he looked back through the frosted window, saw her sleeping by the fire with the baby in her arms, a strange warmth settled in his chest. He didn't know it yet, but that night, when he carried a stranger through his door, was the night his lonely ranch began to feel like a home again. Morning came quietly, like the world itself was holding its breath. The storm had passed, leaving the land washed clean. Pale sunlight spilled through the curtains, touching the wooden floorboards of the McGraw ranch house. The only sound was the steady crackle of the dying fire and the faint coo of a baby breathing in sleep. Clara woke slowly, disoriented at first. The room smelled faintly of pine smoke and bread. Her dress was dry, her body wrapped in a thick quilt. For a moment, she couldn't remember how she'd gotten here. Then she turned and saw her baby, bundled beside her, his tiny face pink and peaceful. The fever had broken, her throat tightened with gratitude. She pressed her lips to his forehead and whispered, "Thank you." "Lord, seems he's past the worst of it," came a gentle voice. Clara looked up to see May, the ranch's housekeeper, carrying a tray of broth and bread. Her eyes were warm and kind, the sort that saw too much but never judged. "How long?" Clara's voice came out hoarse. "How long have I been here?" "Since last night," May said, setting the tray down. "You fainted by the fire. That rancher of mine, Eli, near carried you clear from the gate. He may grumble, but he's got a heart softer than he lets on." Clara smiled faintly. "I'll thank him when he returns." May poured her a cup of hot tea. "He's been up since dawn, fixing fences the wind tore down. That man never stops moving. Guess it's easier than remembering." Clara didn't ask what May meant. She didn't have the right. She was already a stranger in someone else's home, and she could feel that unease creeping in, the kind that told her she'd overstayed before she'd even had the chance to start. Still, she needed to say it. "Please tell him," I'll leave as soon as the baby's strong enough. I don't mean to trouble anyone. May gave a quiet chuckle. Trouble? Honey, you brought life into this house. You stay put till you're steady on your feet. The kindness nearly undid her. She blinked back tears and nodded, unable to find words. Later that morning, Eli returned. His boots were caked in mud, his hat pulled low, but when he stepped inside and saw the mother and child awake, something unreadable crossed his face, relief maybe, or something deeper he didn't want to show. "You're awake," he said simply. "Yes," Clara replied, her voice soft but steady. I owe you my life." Eli shook his head. "You don't owe me a thing. Just take care of that baby." She wanted to tell him how far she'd walked, how she'd run out of money and hope, how this ranch had been her last chance, but pride held her back. Instead, she looked down at her hands, worn and rough from hard work, and said quietly, "He's all I've got left." Eli studied her for a long moment. The firelight caught the tired grace in her face, the strength beneath the exhaustion. He recognized it because he carried the same kind of emptiness. "You'll stay till he's better," he said finally. "May'll see you've got food and a warm bed." Clara opened her mouth to protest, but he was already turning toward the door. "It's just the decent thing," he added gruffly, as if to make sure she knew it wasn't kindness. After he left, May smirked to herself. "That man's as gentle as a thundercloud," she said, shaking her head. "But he means well." Clara smiled faintly, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She looked down at her baby, his tiny hand clutching her finger, and felt something she hadn't felt since her husband died. Safety. Outside. The storm had gone, but in that quiet house, something new had begun to stir. A fragile peace. A shared silence between two broken souls who didn't yet know they were healing each other. Eli McGraw had always believed in keeping his past buried, 6 feet deep, like the people he'd lost. Out on the range, under the wide Wyoming sky, it was easy to pretend that the wind could scatter memories just like dust. But ever since that woman and her baby arrived, the old ghost had started stirring again. He spent most of his days now outside, fixing fences, hauling feed, or breaking horses that didn't want to be tamed. Work was his refuge. Work didn't ask questions. But lately, even that wasn't enough to quiet the sound of a baby's soft cries echoing from the house. Sometimes, when he paused by the barn, he'd catch sight of Clara through the kitchen window, her hair loose, her sleeves rolled, humming to the child while May chopped vegetables beside her. The picture was too gentle, too warm. It hurt in ways he didn't understand. May noticed it too. "You keep staring at that window, Eli," she teased one morning. "You'll wear a hole clean through the glass." He frowned and wiped his hands on a rag. "Ain't staring. Just making sure she's not overworking herself." May's eyes twinkled. That's what we're calling it now?" He gave her a look that made her laugh. Still, when he turned away, his chest felt heavier than before. Later that evening, he saddled his horse and rode out to the ridge. The sky was turning gold over the horizon, painting the hills in light. He used to love these sunsets. He and his wife, Anna, had watched them together once. Years ago, back when the ranch was still growing, and he still believed in tomorrow. But tomorrow had come and taken her away. The memory hit him sharp as a knife. Anna's laughter echoing through the kitchen, her small hand resting on her belly, whispering about the baby they'd soon hold. Then the fever came, sudden and merciless. He'd ridden all night for a doctor, but by the time he returned, it was too late. The world had gone quiet in a way that never lifted again. He'd buried them both on the hill overlooking the stream. Since then, he'd made sure the ranch ran like clockwork, that the fences were high and his heart was higher. No one had crossed that fence, until Clara. When he came back to the house that night, the lamps were dim. Clara was sitting by the fire, mending one of May's old aprons. The baby slept in a basket beside her. She looked up when he entered, her face calm but cautious, as if she still wasn't sure how welcome she was. "You've been out late," she said softly. He nodded. "Had fences to check? Always working," she said, smiling faintly. "Does it help?" Her words struck deeper than she knew. Eli hesitated, then sat in the chair across from her. Sometimes. Keeps the noise down. She looked at him curiously. What noise? The kind you can't hear, but can't stop remembering. Clara said nothing for a while. The fire popped softly between them. Then she said, I know that kind. Their eyes met, two wounded souls recognizing the same emptiness in each other. Eli stood, breaking the moment before it got too real. You and the boy can stay as long as you need, he said roughly. No one will bother you here. Thank you, she whispered. As he walked away, the baby stirred, giving a small, contented sigh. Eli paused, watching the tiny hand curl and unclench. Something inside him, something he thought had died with Anna, moved again. Later, lying awake in his empty room, he realized that for the first time in years, the house didn't feel so quiet, and that terrified him more than any storm ever could. By the next week, the ranch had settled into a strange new rhythm, one that Clara wasn't sure she had the right to disturb. Every morning, the rooster crowed before dawn, and she'd wake to the sound of boots on the porch, Eli heading out to the stables before the first light touched the valley. May would already be in the kitchen by then, humming as she kneaded dough or poured coffee thick as tar. Clara tried at first just to stay out of the way. She didn't want to be a burden. The thought alone made her stomach twist. She'd seen that look before, the quiet pity that turned to resentment when kindness was stretched too thin. On the fourth morning, she decided she couldn't just sit there anymore. When May came into the kitchen, Clara was already there, sleeves rolled and hair tied back, trying to light the stove. The older woman blinked in surprise. Well, I'll be. You planning to steal my job, are you? Clara smiled shyly. Just thought I could help. You've done so much already. Let me earn my keep. May studied her for a moment, then gave a soft chuckle. Suit yourself, dear. I could use an extra pair of hands. But don't you work yourself to the bone. From that day, Clara threw herself into every chore she could find. She scrubbed floors, mended curtains, washed clothes, and even helped May cook for the ranch hands. Her hands blistered and her back ached, but it felt good, honest. For the first time since her husband's death, she had purpose again. When Eli returned from the fields one evening, he found her outside, hanging laundry on the line while the baby napped in a basket nearby. The sunset caught her hair and turned it gold. For a moment, he just stood there, watching the scene in quiet disbelief. You don't have to do all that, he said finally, his voice carrying across the yard. Clara turned, startled. I can't just take without giving something back. You're not taking, he said. Her chin lifted slightly, pride flickering in her eyes. Maybe not in your eyes, but I was raised to stand on my own feet, Mr. McGraw, not to live off someone else's mercy. The firmness in her tone surprised him. He almost smiled. Suit yourself, then. Just don't wear yourself out. She nodded once, then went back to her work, the wind tugging at the clothesline between them. For some reason, that exchange stayed with him all evening. Later, after supper, he found her in the barn, soothing her baby to sleep while the horses shifted quietly in their stalls. The lantern light painted soft shadows across her face. He leaned on the doorway, silent for a long time before speaking. You don't have to prove anything here, he said gently. She didn't look up. Maybe not. But working reminds me I'm still worth something. Eli felt a pang in his chest. He understood that kind of pride, the stubborn need to survive with dignity, even when the world had taken everything else. He wanted to tell her she was worth something, that no amount of work or suffering could change that. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded toward the sleeping baby. He looks better. Clara smiled, the kind of smile that could break a man's silence. He is, thanks to you. Don't thank me, Eli said, turning to leave. Just stay safe. She watched him go, wondering what kind of man buried his kindness behind such few words. That night, as she lay beside her child, Clara whispered a promise to herself. I'll repay this man's kindness one way or another. Not with money, but with work, with honor. And in the quiet house, with the wind brushing softly against the window panes. She didn't know that Eli, alone in his room, was making a promise too. I won't let the world break her like it broke me. By the time spring winds began sweeping across the valley, life at the McGraw Ranch had changed in quiet, noticeable ways. The air no longer carried the weight of silence. It hummed with small sounds, May's laughter in the kitchen, Clara humming while she worked, and the baby's soft coos echoing through the house. Eli didn't speak of it much, but even he couldn't deny that the place felt different now. Lighter, alive. But the men who worked for him, rough, sunburned ranch hands who'd been with Eli for years, noticed it too. And men like that never saw a change without finding something to talk about. It started one afternoon near the corrals. Tommy Haynes, a wiry cowhand with a mean streak, leaned on the fence chewing a blade of grass. "You seen that widow hanging round the boss's porch again?" he said with a smirk. The others chuckled. "Hard to miss," said another. "Pretty little thing, for a woman what's had it rough." "Pretty or not," Tommy drawled. "She's got herself settled mighty quick. Makes you wonder what kind of thanks she's given him for his trouble." The laughter that followed was low and knowing. But what none of them realized was that May had heard every word. By supper time, the gossip had spread like wildfire through the ranch yard. By morning, Clara felt it in every look. The sudden hush when she passed the barn, the half-smiles that didn't reach the eyes. At first, she tried to ignore it. She'd known cruel talk before. Words had chased her out of her last town after all. But when she overheard two men whispering near the water pump, something about her playing wife to the boss, her cheeks burned hot with shame. That evening, she found Eli near the stables, tightening a saddle strap. "Mr. McGraw," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I think it's best if I leave." He looked up, frowning. "Leave? What for?" "I appreciate everything you've done," she said quickly. "But folks are talking." "About me, about you. I can't stay where I'm not wanted." Eli's jaw clenched. "Who's been talking?" "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "I can't let your kindness turn into something ugly." He took a step closer, his eyes dark under the brim of his hat. "You listen to me, Clara. You and that boy aren't leaving over a pack of cowhand gossip. They'll quiet down soon enough, but they're saying things that I don't give a damn what they're saying." His voice rose suddenly, sharp as a whip crack. The horses stirred nervously in their stalls. Clara froze, her heart pounding. Eli saw the fear flash in her eyes and immediately stepped back, lowering his tone. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Didn't mean to shout. But I won't have you run off because some fools can't mind their business." She looked at him, uncertain. "You shouldn't have to defend me." "Anyone under my roof," he said firmly, "has my name behind them. That includes you and your boy." She stared at him, trying to read the truth in his eyes, and found nothing but sincerity there. Slowly, she nodded. The next morning, Eli called his men together in the yard. His words were calm, but his tone left no room for doubt. "If I hear another word about Mrs. Clara or that child, you can find work elsewhere. This ranch don't feed gossip or cowards." The yard fell silent. No one met his gaze. Later, when May told Clara what he'd done, tears filled her eyes. "He shouldn't have had to do that," she whispered. May just smiled knowingly. A man only stands up like that when something, or someone, means more to him than he's ready to admit. That night, as the wind rustled through the cottonwoods, Clara stood by the window, holding her baby. She looked out across the moonlit fields toward the barn where Eli worked late, his lantern glowing faintly in the dark. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a stranger. She felt protected. She felt belonging. The days that followed were calm, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm you don't yet see coming. Spring settled over the valley, painting the hills in green and gold. Clara worked the garden behind the house, humming as her baby played on a blanket beside her. For the first time in months, her laughter drifted across the ranch yard like music. Eli pretended not to notice how often he found excuses to pass by that garden. He'd check the fence, the soil, the sky, anything to catch a glimpse of her kneeling in the sunlight, her hands stained with earth and life. He'd never admit it, not even to May, but the ranch no longer felt empty. But peace on the frontier was a fragile thing, easily broken by the sound of approaching hooves. It was near sundown when the rider came. Dust rose behind his horse like smoke. He was a tall man in a black coat, his face shadowed beneath the brim of his hat. Eli, standing on the porch, felt something tighten in his gut. Trouble had a way of finding its way up the trail, and this one rode like he meant it. The man dismounted and tied his horse to the post, his boots heavy on the porch steps. "Evening," he drawled. "Name's Warren Hale. I'm looking for a woman by the name of Clara Hale." Eli's expression hardened. "You found the McGraw Ranch," he said evenly. "Can't say I know what business you've got here." The man smiled without warmth. "You can drop the act, friend. She's my sister-in-law, my late brother's widow." His voice turned sharper. She ran off, took what wasn't hers. "I just came to fetch what's rightfully mine." Eli's eyes narrowed. "And what's that supposed to mean?" "Money," Warren said flatly. "My brother owed me before he died. She's got jewelry, papers, something of value." "And she's been hiding, hasn't she?" By then, Clara had stepped onto the porch, the baby in her arms. When she saw the man, her face drained of color. "Warren," she whispered. "Well, there she is," he said, grinning. "Was wondering how long you'd keep playing house." Eli stepped between them, his voice like gravel. "You best watch your tongue," Warren smirked. "Seems the lady's made herself quite at home. Guess that's what happens when a pretty widow finds herself alone with a man like you." The words hit harder than a slap. But before Clara could speak, Eli's hand was already on the butt of his revolver. The air between them turned heavy and still. "I'll say this once," Eli said quietly. "You'll leave this ranch and you'll do it now. Whatever she owed you, consider it settled." Warren laughed. "You think you can buy your way into her life?" "She'll ruin you, McGraw. She ruins every man she touches." Clara's voice broke through the tension. "That's enough! You took everything from us, my husband's savings, our home. There's nothing left for you to take." The baby began to cry. She clutched him tighter, trembling. Warren's eyes turned cold. "Then maybe I'll take the boy. He's the only thing worth anything to you, ain't he?" That did it. Eli moved before the man could blink, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the porch post. The lantern light caught the steel in his eyes. "You ever speak her name again like that, I'll bury you out past the ridge and let the coyotes finish the job." Warren stared back, defiant. But beneath the bluster, he saw something he didn't dare test. He spat dust, straightened his coat, and stepped off the porch. "You'll regret this, McGraw," he muttered, mounting his horse. "She's bad luck, same as every woman who don't know her place." Eli didn't move until the man disappeared down the trail. Only then did he turn to Clara, who was shaking, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean for any of this to reach you." Eli took the baby from her trembling arms, his voice low and steady. "Ain't your fault. He won't bother you again." But as he looked out into the dark horizon, the echo of Warren's threat lingered. For the first time since Clara arrived, Eli felt that old sense of danger return, the one that warned him peace never lasts long in a world like this. And this time, he knew. Whatever storm was coming, he'd stand between her and the lightning. The ranch slept under a blanket of silence that night, the kind that usually meant peace, but not this time. Not after Warren Hale's visit. Eli hadn't said much after the man rode off, but his face was different now, sharper, harder. He'd checked every lock, every lantern, and every rifle before turning in. Trouble, he knew, had a way of circling back like a hungry wolf. Clara couldn't sleep either. Long after May had gone to bed, she sat by the cradle, rocking her baby in the dim light. Her mind raced through the day's events. Warren's voice, his threats, the look in Eli's eyes when he'd stepped between them. She whispered a prayer over her son, her voice trembling. "Please, Lord, let this place stay safe. Don't let my past take this away from him." Outside, a cold wind moved through the barnyard, carrying with it the faint scent of oil. Then, crack. A faint pop split the night. Then another. By the time Eli shot up in bed, the window glowed orange. "Fire!" May screamed from down the hall. Eli was out the door in seconds, pulling on his boots as the smell of smoke filled the house. The barn was ablaze, flames licking up the sides of the timber walls, sparks scattering into the night sky like angry stars. "The horses were screaming, 'Trapped! Stay inside!'" he shouted at Clara as he grabbed a bucket and ran for the well. But before he could stop her, she was right behind him, clutching a wet blanket around her shoulders. "You can't fight that alone," she cried. "Get back in the house." "I won't." Her voice cut through the roar of the fire. And before Eli could argue, she ran toward the barn doors, the blanket held high against the flames. The heat was fierce, the smoke thick enough to choke, but she didn't stop. Inside, two of the younger mares were kicking wildly, eyes white with terror. "Easy, girl," she whispered hoarsely, coughing. "It's all right. Come on now." Eli burst in after her, cursing under his breath. "You'll kill yourself in here!" "Not if we move fast," she shouted back, her face smeared with ash. Together, they untied the panicked horses and led them out through the side gate. Sparks burned holes in Clara's blanket, and her hair stuck to her face with sweat. A wooden beam cracked and fell behind them, flames exploding upward. Eli grabbed her arm and yanked her clear just in time, shielding her with his body as embers rained down. For a moment, neither spoke, just the sound of the fire devouring wood and the horses snorting in the dark. When the last horse was safe, they stood back, watching the barn collapse in a shower of sparks. The night sky glowed red, the smoke thick as fog. "It was him," Eli said, breathing hard. "Warren, no doubt in my mind." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Eli. This is my fault." He turned to her sharply. "Don't you ever say that." "But the barn—" "I can rebuild a barn," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I can't rebuild what would have been lost if you hadn't run in there." Clara looked down at her hands, burned and trembling. "You risked your life for mine," she whispered. Eli's gaze softened. He reached out, brushing a streak of soot from her cheek. "You risked yours first." The fire burned low behind them, the worst of it over. But in that silence, something else was born, something fierce and wordless. He realized, standing there with the smoke curling around them, that it wasn't just the barn he was fighting for anymore. It was her. It was the life she'd brought into his lonely world. As the dawn began to rise over the ashes, Clara leaned against him, exhausted but alive. And in that quiet moment, Eli McGraw made his choice. He'd protect her and that baby with everything he had left, no matter what it cost him. The ranch could be rebuilt. But the feeling of holding something worth saving again, that he knew, was a gift he'd almost forgotten how to pray for. Dawn came soft and gray, creeping slowly over the hills as if unsure it was welcome after the night's destruction. Smoke still curled from the blackened skeleton of the barn, rising into the pale sky like a ghost that refused to leave. The air smelled of ash, wet earth, and sorrow. Eli stood at the edge of the ruins, hat in hand, his face shadowed by exhaustion. He hadn't slept a wink. After the fire died down, he'd worked through the night, checking fences, counting the animals, making sure nothing else was lost. Only when the first light touched the ridge did he finally stop moving. The barn had been part of his father's legacy, built board by board when Eli was barely tall enough to hold a hammer. Losing it felt like losing another piece of the old man. But even so, as he looked back toward the house, where Clara and the baby were safe, he knew what mattered had survived. Behind him, he heard soft footsteps crunching on the damp ground. Clara approached, wrapped in one of May's shawls, her hair pulled loose from its braid. She looked pale and tired, but her eyes held a steady warmth that hadn't been there before. "You should rest," Eli said without turning. "I could say the same to you," she replied softly. He smiled faintly. "A rancher don't get to rest, not when there's work to do." She came to stand beside him, gazing at the smoldering remains. "It's worse than I thought," she murmured. "I'm so sorry, Eli." He glanced at her, his voice low and calm. "You keep saying that, but you got nothing to be sorry for." "Yes, I do." Her voice trembled. "He came because of me, because I ran. You and May didn't deserve to be dragged into my mess." Eli set his hat back on his head and sighed. "Clara, I've been on this land my whole life. Fires come, droughts come, rustlers come. You can fix what's burned down, but people, good people, they don't come often. And when they do, you don't let them walk away blaming themselves. Her throat tightened, and she blinked back tears. You're a good man, Eli McGraw. He turned toward her, eyes steady. No, ma'am. Just a man trying to do right by what's been given to him. And right now that means you and that little one. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind moved through the grass, carrying with it the faint sound of birdsong returning after the storm. Finally, Clara whispered, I don't know how to thank you. You've given us a home when we had nothing. You've risked everything to keep us safe. Eli looked down at the ground, scuffing his boot against the dirt. You don't owe me thanks, Clara. Truth is. He paused, the words catching in his throat. Truth is, I needed you more than you ever needed me. Her eyes lifted to his, startled. This place was dying before you came. He went on quietly. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. You brought life back here, laughter, warmth, even that baby's cry. Reminded me what it feels like to have something worth fighting for again. Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks, but she didn't hide them. I don't know if I deserve that, she whispered. You do, he said simply. More than you think. The baby stirred in her arms, cooing softly as if to break the heaviness in the air. Clara smiled through her tears. Eli reached out, gently brushing a soot mark from the child's blanket. He's a strong little fella. Takes after his mama. She looked up at him then, really looked. And for the first time since her husband's death, she felt something unbroken stir inside her chest. Not the wild rush of romance, but the slow, sure warmth of belonging. The morning sun broke fully over the ridge, turning the smoke to gold. Eli straightened, pulling on his gloves. Come on now, he said with a quiet smile. We got work to do. Can't let a little fire keep us down. Clara nodded, wiping her eyes. Then let's rebuild it together. He met her gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. Something stronger than gratitude, deeper than duty. And as they walked back toward the house, side by side, the ranch no longer looked like a place marked by loss. It looked like a home being reborn. One sunrise, one heartbeat at a time. Weeks passed since the fire, and spring deepened over the McGraw Ranch. The charred remains of the barn had been cleared, replaced by the rising frame of a new one. Fresh timber, clean and golden in the sun, stood where ashes once lay, a living symbol of survival. Eli worked from dawn to dusk, his sleeves rolled and hat pulled low, sweat streaking the dust on his face. But this time he wasn't alone. Clara was always there, hauling water, steadying boards, feeding the workers, laughing with May on the porch. Her laughter carried across the fields like sunlight through clouds, bright and sure. The baby, now stronger and growing fast, had become the heart of the ranch. Everyone doted on him. May knitted little socks. Eli carved him a tiny wooden horse. There were nights when Eli would find himself standing quietly in the doorway, watching Clara rock her son by lamplight. The sight filled him with something he hadn't felt in years, peace. But even peace. He knew sometimes needed words to hold it still. One evening, as the sun melted into gold over the horizon, Eli found Clara sitting on the fence, looking out over the land. The wind teased her hair, and her dress glowed soft in the dying light. The baby slept soundly in the crook of her arm. Looks good out here, he said, stepping up beside her. Land's starting to heal, she smiled faintly. So are we. Eli nodded, quiet for a moment. Barn's near finished. May says she wants to hold a little supper once it's done. Reckons we could use some laughter around here again. I think she's right, Clara said softly. You've all done so much. He looked down at her, his hands resting on the fence rail. Ain't just me. You've worked as hard as anyone. She shook her head, smiling shyly. I've just been trying to repay a kindness I can never really repay. Eli hesitated, then said, You really believe that? She turned to him, puzzled. He took off his hat, running a hand through his hair. Clara, I've been thinking a lot about what you said the night of the fire. About not deserving all this. About bringing trouble here. Truth is, this ranch ain't been this alive since my pa passed. You brought that life back. You and that boy both. Her eyes shimmered in the evening light. Eli. He took a slow breath, voice steady but soft. I told myself I'd never ask another woman to stay, not after losing so much already. But the more I see you here, the more I can't picture this place without you. So if it ain't too soon, if it don't scare you none, I need to say this plain. He turned toward her fully, his voice low, honest, unpolished. You both belong here. You and your boy. Not as guests, as family, Clara's breath caught. You mean? I mean, this is your home now if you want it to be, he said. You don't owe me anything. Just stay. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they came with a smile, real and unguarded. Eli, I don't know what to say. He smiled gently. Then don't. Just say you'll stay. She looked down at the baby sleeping against her chest, then back up at him. I will, she whispered. We will. He exhaled slowly, the tension he'd carried for months breaking into something light and sure. He reached out, touching her hand. Then that settled. They stood there as the last light of day faded, the land around them painted in gold and shadow. The new barn stood behind them, strong and waiting, like a promise kept. Inside the house, May's voice carried through the open window, humming an old tune about second chances and springtime. Clara leaned her head against Eli's shoulder, the baby nestled safely between them. You were right, she murmured. This place, it feels alive. Eli smiled, his eyes on the glowing horizon. That's 'cause it finally is. And as night settled over the valley, the McGraw Ranch stood not as a monument to loss, but as a home reborn built from ashes, faith, and the quiet kind of love that lasts forever.